Rain-slicked asphalt reflected the orange glare of streetlights as I slammed the truck door. My boots splashed through puddles, echoing against the empty pine-lined road. I hadn't even reached the property line when I noticed it, the sign hand-painted, jagged letters spelling Pine Haven, Christmas trees, tilted, waterlogged, yet defiantly bright against the dark horizon. Something about it felt off. The farm had looked perfect online, quaint, sprawling acres just outside the HOA's tight grip. I'd imagined quiet mornings sipping coffee in a plaid chair, snow-dusted firs stretching into the misty hills. But standing here now, the air tasted too sharp, too electric. And then I saw her. Karen. The HOA's self-appointed queen, clipboard in hand, hair a tight coil of control. She appeared almost from nowhere, stepping between the trees as though she owned the very shadows. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice like ice sliding over gravel. I lifted my hands, casual. "I bought the farm, Karen. Just trying to survey my trees." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, the sale's complicated. These trees aren't really yours yet." I frowned, the first knot of unease tightening in my stomach. I'd read the paperwork. I'd signed the check. The land was mine. And yet, standing in her presence, a sense of intrusion prickled along my spine, like the static before a storm. I tried to shake it off, walking between the rows. Pines were young, vibrant, some leaning as if reaching for approval. But my boots sank in the mud, and every step carried a subtle crunch and unnatural rhythm, like someone or something was following. Karen's clipboard tapped against her wrist. "You're not the only one who's interested in these trees," she said, eyes flicking to a far corner of the farm where the mist clung like a living thing. I stopped. "Interested?" She shrugged, a motion too rehearsed. "People see value in more than just wood, you know. Some see opportunity." A sudden rustle made me whip around. A branch snapped. Nothing. But the hairs on my neck stood. I'd moved from city life into rural simplicity, expecting calm. Instead, it felt like the farm itself was watching me, each pine a sentinel. Karen gestured to a clearing ahead. "Let's walk. I'll explain why things are never simple around here." I followed, trying to mask suspicion with polite nods. She led me past rows of saplings, past an old barn leaning on creaking beams. Her voice was calm, almost hypnotic, as she spoke of community, tradition, and responsibility. But there was a rhythm to her words, a subtle pressure, like she was drilling for something beneath my facade. And then she laughed. Light, airy, but it carried a weight that made my chest tighten. "You really think buying this farm means you're in control? Sweetheart, you have no idea what runs this town." A crow caught above, and I swore it sounded like a warning. By the time we reached the main field, the first subtle evidence appeared, a patch of trees with faint white paint splattered across their trunks. I crouched. Finger pressed against the bark. Fresh. I glanced at Karen. She looked serene. Too serene. "Pine treatment," she explained smoothly, but my gut twisted. No one treated trees like that in a Christmas farm. Not this early. Not in this manner. Something about the consistency, the pattern, it wasn't chemical. It was deliberate. "Interesting," I murmured. My mind clicked. There were no labels, no paperwork. Just a cryptic smear. Karen's eyes narrowed for a brief second, almost imperceptibly, before her practiced mask returned. "You're new here. You'll learn soon enough. Some trees are special." The last rays of sunlight disappeared, leaving the farm in a cloak of fog. I noticed subtle footprints leading away from the painted trees toward the back fence. The tracks were small, precise. Not like a worker's, not like an animal's. And they vanished. Karen, sensing my attention, waved me onward. "Let's go inside the barn. I think you need to see how operations are really handled." Inside, the smell hit me, fresh pine, earth, and something metallic underneath. The barn wasn't just storage, it was organized like a lab. Rows of trees, some in cages, some tagged with symbols I didn't recognize. And in the corner, a desk stacked with ledgers, receipts, and dozens of photos pinned to the wall. Some were innocent, happy families choosing trees. Others weren't. Faces blurred, eyes wide, but the focus on the trees was obsessive. I swallowed. The normalcy I expected, the pastoral dream, was slipping through my fingers. This was not a Christmas farm. This was a stage, a carefully constructed illusion hiding something else. Karen leaned against a beam, arms crossed. Do you understand now? Understand what? I asked cautiously, forcing calm. That nothing here is accidental. Not the land, not the trees, not your arrival. Her words sank into me like ice. My first day as the farm's owner had become a test, and I hadn't even realized the rules. The gentle intrusion of fog outside seemed to creep inside, curling around my thoughts, whispering that this was only the beginning. And then, almost as if on cue, the lights flickered. The next morning, fog rolled across the farm like a living thing, swallowing rows of pines in a pale, ghostly haze. I walked the property alone, boots squelching in damp earth, eyes scanning for the subtle irregularities I'd noticed yesterday. Every footprint, every smear of white, every crooked sapling whispered a pattern, but what pattern? Inside the barn, Karen's absence was both relief and suspicion. I traced my fingers along the ledger she'd left in disarray, flipping pages slowly. Numbers, codes, dates. At first glance, it looked like ordinary inventory, tree heights, sales, deliveries. But then I noticed repetitions, rows of trees labeled under aliases, some locations tied to addresses outside the county, some shipments lost in transit. My heart quickened. Someone was orchestrating a network, a scam hidden under the guise of holiday cheer. And Karen had been orchestrating it all. I slipped on rubber gloves and stepped into the mud outside, following the footprints from yesterday's painted trees. They led to a dense thicket along the edge of the property. I crouched, brushing away ferns and fallen pine needles. Beneath them, buried partially in the dirt, was a crate. Small, reinforced, and surprisingly heavy. Inside? Receipts, envelopes, and dozens of small checks, all made out to Karen M., with amounts just below the threshold that triggered bank scrutiny. My pulse jumped. This wasn't just a local HOA scheme, this was a layered scam, built meticulously over months, maybe years. I froze. A shadow fell across the crate. Karen's voice, low and deceptively sweet, came from behind. Curiosity is dangerous, you know. I spun around, heart pounding. She stood there, the fog curling around her like a cloak, eyes sharp, lips tight. I was just inventory, I stammered, shoving the papers back. She stepped closer. You really think you've uncovered everything? You barely scratched the surface. I met her gaze, steady despite the rush of adrenaline. If you've been scamming people, I'm not going to let it continue. Karen's laugh was quiet, dangerous. Let's see if you can prove anything. That night, I returned to the farm with a camera, flashlights, and a plan. Karen might think she was in control, but control was an illusion. I moved quietly, documenting everything, the ledger codes, the crates, the unusual markings on trees. Every step was calculated. Every snap of the camera a small victory. The deeper I went, the more I realized the network extended beyond her farm. There were trails pointing toward other properties, neighboring HOA plots, even a few city lots. People who had bought special trees never received them. Others had paid extra for guaranteed delivery only to have their checks vanish into Karen's accounts. And then came the first real warning. A low rustle in the trees, deliberate, almost taunting. I froze, heart thudding. A figure emerged, too quick, too deliberate. I ducked behind a pine, holding my breath. Karen's minion? Or someone else watching the farm for months, waiting for an opportunity? The fog masked details, but I caught the flash of reflective eyes before they disappeared into the mist. I returned to the barn, adrenaline still thrumming, and noticed something new. A small camera, hidden in the corner near the ceiling, blinking softly. My every move had been observed, recorded. Karen wasn't just playing with numbers, she was orchestrating fear, surveillance, control. I set up my own countermeasures. motion sensors, my own camera angles, notes on ledger codes. Every pattern, every irregularity, I catalogued. It became a game of cat and mouse, with the farm itself as the board. Over the next days, I dug deeper. Using subtle cues from Karen's operations, I traced delivery schedules, payment flows, and hidden inventory. Each discovery painted a picture: a network of trust manipulated, payments rerouted, community members deceived. Karen had built an empire under the guise of festive cheer. Then, the breakthrough came. While reviewing photographs, I noticed a recurring mark: a small pine sapling with 3 scratches on the trunk. Not random, not natural. I cross-referenced with the ledgers. Every occurrence matched missing checks or disputed deliveries. Whoever saw that mark knew exactly what was happening. I realized the stakes were higher than I thought. This wasn't just a small-town scam. Someone, maybe Karen, maybe someone above her, was controlling multiple fronts, manipulating neighbors, businesses, even the HOA board. And they were careful. Calculated. Dangerous. Late that night, Karen appeared again. This time inside the barn, calm, arms crossed, but her eyes sharp. "You're digging too deep." I held her gaze. "And I'm not stopping." Her smile flickered, just for a moment. "Then I hope you're prepared for what comes next." I didn't know exactly what that meant. Threats in the dark were one thing, traps were another. And I could feel it: something bigger than Karen herself was lurking, watching, waiting. The calm farm atmosphere had vanished, replaced by a tense, electric vigilance. Each pine seemed to lean toward me, as if sharing secrets of the network I'd barely begun to uncover. The night stretched long, and I stayed in the barn, camera feeds illuminating corners, ledger codes scattered across the desk. My mind raced, connecting dots, piecing together the web of deceit. The farm wasn't just a plot of land. It was a stage, a carefully constructed trap, and I was in the center. By sunrise, I had a plan. Evidence documented, irregularities mapped, patterns established. I could expose Karen, but only if I moved with precision, intelligence, and patience. The threat had grown, expanding far beyond the farmhouse and the pines. And in that quiet dawnlight, I realized the fight had only begun. Somewhere beyond the fog, beyond the perimeter of my new property, the bigger enemy waited. And I wasn't just uncovering a scam. I was stepping into a dangerous game of strategy, surveillance, and betrayal. The HOA meeting hall smelled of polished wood and recycled tension, a stark contrast to the earthy scent of my pine farm. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as neighbors shuffled in, murmuring under their breaths. I had expected skepticism. After all, I was the new owner, the outsider. But tonight, skepticism would meet proof. Karen sat at the head table, clipboard in hand, radiating control. Her smile was rehearsed, perfectly timed for the cameras rolling for the community newsletter. She believed she had the stage, the audience, the narrative. I had something better: undeniable evidence. I stepped forward, folder in hand, heart hammering but mind sharp. The first photograph hit the projector: the marked saplings, the white painted trunks, the buried crates with falsified receipts. A murmur ran through the room. Karen's eyes narrowed. She hadn't expected this, at least not yet. "Neighbors," I began, voice calm but firm, "what I'm about to show you isn't rumor. It's proof. These trees, our community's seasonal symbol, have been manipulated, diverted, and sold under false pretenses for months." Gasps. A few whispered questions. Karen's hand twitched near the clipboard, her carefully constructed mask slipping for a fraction of a second. Slide after slide revealed the network: ledger codes linked to off-site addresses, checks rerouted, missing deliveries. Patterns of deception hidden in plain sight, now exposed under the harsh glare of reality. A woman in the back stood, trembling. That's my payment. I never received my tree." Another man pointed at Karen. "And I paid extra for delivery. Where did it go?" Karen's voice rose, trying to regain control. "This is nonsense. Fabricated accusations. You're all being misled." But the room had shifted. Doubt had replaced the audience's blind trust. Eyes flicked between the evidence and Karen, who now showed cracks in her armor. I held my ground. These are not accusations. This is documentation. Ledger entries, photographs, marked trees, all traced back to these transactions. You can see for yourselves. I clicked to the next slide. The hidden camera footage from the barn played. Karen moving between crates, handling checks, monitoring the farm like a hawk. Not just a small-town operator and orchestrator, meticulous and relentless. Her composure faltered. I saw it, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Her smile slipped, hands trembling, as the room absorbed the proof. People whispered, pointing, connecting their experiences with mine. Karen tried to interrupt. You don't understand. This is bigger than you realize. The farm. I cut her off, voice low but commanding. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. But hiding behind control doesn't make you untouchable. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Karen lunged for the projector, trying to shut it down. In one smooth motion, I stepped forward, blocking her, heart racing. The crowd gasped as the confrontation became physical, a shocking display of desperation. Her scream echoed, "You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with." The room held its breath. Security or volunteers rushed forward to separate us. Karen's mask of control shattered completely. The powerful veneer, the aura of dominance, was gone, replaced with raw fear. I continued speaking, calmer now, letting the room absorb the truth. She's just the tip of the iceberg. But now, we know. Now, the community can act. That's how we reclaim what's ours. The murmurs grew louder, neighbors exchanging phone numbers, taking photographs of the slides, recording videos. The evidence had gone viral in real time within the hall. Karen tried to speak again, but no one listened. Her empire of deception crumbled under the weight of facts and collective awareness. And then, the twist. The projector flickered, showing a photograph I hadn't uploaded, one from the corner of the barn, not tied to Karen, but another figure, masked, observing her closely during operations. The room fell silent. Even Karen froze, eyes wide. "Who is that?" someone whispered. I leaned into the microphone. "That's what we don't know yet. Someone or something bigger has been orchestrating behind the scenes." The shock was palpable. Karen's carefully crafted narrative couldn't withstand scrutiny now, but the image implied that she wasn't the sole player. A network, a shadow, a hidden mastermind, still out there, still pulling strings. Outside, headlights flashed against the windows as authorities arrived, alerted by neighbors who had captured the evidence on their phones. Karen was escorted out, resisting, shouting fragmented threats. The community was watching. And yet, the presence of the masked figure hinted that the threat wasn't over. I stepped back, heart racing but exhilarated. The hall had shifted from controlled chaos to organized awareness. People were talking, connecting, planning. The scam had been exposed publicly, and Karen's reign had ended, at least on the surface. But the photograph lingered in my mind. The figure, small but deliberate, watching from the shadows. Whoever they were, they had orchestrated, manipulated, guided Karen, and possibly others, from behind the scenes. And if Karen had been this meticulous, I shivered imagining the scale of the hidden network. The meeting adjourned, neighbors leaving with a mixture of relief, shock, and determination. I remained for a moment, staring at the empty hall, the projector screen still glowing faintly. The victory was mine for now, but the bigger threat loomed. Someone was still out there, patient, intelligent, observing the fallout, planning the next move. I stepped into the crisp night air, taking a deep breath. The stars were bright, the mist lingering over the pine farms beyond the HOA. The community had seen the truth. The immediate danger, Karen, was gone. But the shadow of the mastermind remained, a chilling whisper in the wind, a reminder that the fight wasn't over. The stage had changed, the players exposed, and the hunt had only just begun. The morning after the HOA showdown, the town felt different. Streets that had once hummed with polite neighborly chatter now vibrated with a quiet intensity. Everyone had seen the evidence, felt the truth settle in like sediment at the bottom of a pond. The scam had been exposed, Karen's control broken, but the ripples of her deception stretched far beyond the farm. I returned to my property, boots crunching on frost-hardened earth. The fog was lighter today, almost tentative, as if even the landscape hesitated to reveal its secrets. Rows of pines stood like silent witnesses to the night's revelations. For the first time, I could walk freely, cataloging the subtle changes left behind: the disturbed soil, faint footprints, the crates moved during Karen's frantic night escape. Neighbors had begun coming by, cautiously, quietly. Some apologized for ignoring the warning signs, others brought small gifts or home-baked pies, a silent acknowledgement of solidarity. The farm had become a focal point, a symbol not of Christmas cheer gone wrong, but of vigilance reclaimed. I led one visitor, a local man named Richard, toward the barn. He had lost money in the scam, but his gratitude for exposing it was palpable. "I can't believe someone actually did something," he said, voice low. "You saved a lot of people from her schemes." I nodded, eyes scanning the barn. The ledgers, photos, and evidence still lay arranged as if waiting for the next chapter to unfold. "We've exposed Karen," I said. "But this doesn't end with her." Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" I paused, tracing the marks on a sapling, the same 3 scratches that had first led me to the deeper network. The person she worked for or with is still out there. Someone who orchestrated all of this behind the scenes. Karen was just one player. He shivered. "You think they'll come back?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I turned to the barn window, watching mist curl over the pines. The sense of being observed hadn't left me. Whoever was behind Karen's network had been patient, meticulous, and intelligent. They wouldn't disappear just because one pawn had fallen. The town slowly settled into a tentative rhythm. Community meetings were held to tighten oversight, neighbors collaborated on verifying sales and ownership, and I became an informal liaison, guiding them through the tangled aftermath. Children laughed in the fields, oblivious to the larger threats that had unfolded, but even their carefree voices carried a strange weight. The innocence of the farm had returned, at least on the surface. I spent nights in the barn, reviewing the evidence one last time, cataloging every irregularity, every pattern, every photograph. My mind circled the same unsettling thought: the mastermind's fingerprints were everywhere but invisible, their presence like a shadow stretching across the community. And then, a subtle sign appeared. A single pine at the edge of the property, far larger than the others, bore a new mark: 3 scratches, deliberate, identical to the ones that had revealed the scam. I crouched, running my fingers over them. Someone had been here. Someone had watched, testing the response, leaving a silent message. I knew then that the story wasn't over. Karen had been the face of the scam, the immediate threat, but the deeper network, the hidden operator, remained intact. Patient. Calculating. Waiting for the right moment to strike or manipulate. Even as the town rebuilt trust, even as the community celebrated its first honest Christmas tree sale in years, the unease lingered. The sense of being watched, of unseen forces shaping events, was inescapable. It slithered through the pines, curled around the mist, and whispered in the wind. I spoke to myself quietly, almost as a reassurance: we've won this battle, but not the war. Neighbors continued to come and go, sharing small victories and minor repairs. I noticed the subtle gratitude in their eyes, the respect in the way they spoke, the unspoken acknowledgement of my role in exposing the truth. Yet each interaction, each smile, each handshake carried the shadow of that larger threat, the awareness that vigilance would be required long after the immediate danger had been neutralized. Weeks passed. The farm flourished under my care, and the community slowly regained confidence. Families returned, Christmas decorations adorned homes and streets, and the pine saplings grew taller, stronger, their needles sharp against the crisp winter air. But each night, when the fog rolled in and the stars hung low and distant, I would glance toward that marked pine and feel the lingering presence of the unseen adversary. It was a reminder that the battle had only begun. Karen had been dismantled, but the mastermind, the architect behind the deception, remained a ghost. Watching. Waiting. Testing. And the sense of foreboding was visceral, an echo of tension that refused to be silenced by time or distance. As I closed the barn door and walked into the early morning light, the community seemed peaceful, almost idyllic. But I knew the calm was temporary. Someone out there knew I was aware now. Someone had left a message, subtle, deliberate, and chillingly clear. The game had only just begun. I paused at the edge of the field, staring across the rows of pines. The wind carried the scent of fresh needles and earth, mingled with the faint, inexplicable sense of surveillance. A figure, or perhaps just a shadow, moved in the distance, indistinct yet deliberate, disappearing behind a fog-laden ridge. And in that moment, I understood the truth. Victory was fleeting, awareness was crucial, and the forest, once a symbol of peace, was now a battleground for something far larger, far smarter, and far more dangerous than Karen ever had been. The pines whispered secrets I was determined to uncover. And I would.